Hello, everyone. This is Olga Yershevsky, and we're continuing the NexChange Interview Series with Musheer Ahmed, who's a General Manager and founding board member of Fintech Association of Hong Kong, an independent nonprofit organization which represents and accumulates financial and technological powers of Hong Kong. Hello, Musheer.
Hi, Olga. Very nice to speak to you.
Likewise, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Rainy outside, but bright inside, I guess.
Oh, that's Hong Kong.
Yes.
Let's first talk about that awesome major report that you recently published, which covers the situation in the fintech space in Greater Bay Area. Well, I have to say,
Yes.
a very good job, and we all have a lot to learn from that report. And can you maybe highlight the most fresh and interesting parts of it? What is it about?
Sure. Thank you very much. I'm glad to know you've had a chance to have a look at it. The report was an output of the Fintech Association's Greater Bay Area Committee. We have 14 different committees on different themes like digital banking, payments, RegTech, AI, blockchain, etc. And this one is focused on building collaboration between Hong Kong and the China Greater Bay Area. The Greater Bay Area is effectively called the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau, Greater Bay Area, with 9 cities from Guangdong and Hong Kong and Macau. So in total, 11 cities were part of this ecosystem. It's a blueprint that has been released by the central government in mainland China. And the idea is to assimilate and bring in more collaboration between Macau and Hong Kong special administrative regions with the mainland Chinese ecosystem. So for just on a legal basis, Hong Kong and Macau function as in the one country, two systems process, which is both are special administrative regions of People's Republic of China. However, in terms of the legal systems and administration, etc., they follow their own policies as well as their own systems. So if you look at the legal system in Hong Kong, it's different to the legal system in mainland China, and the overlaps are less. Right? So that's part one. So the GBA covers an area of the size of big European countries. Some of the cities in themselves are competitive and comparable to populations in Europe, as I mentioned, but also in terms of GDP, the net GDP of all these 11 cities is close to $1.7 trillion, which is more or less equal to what we see in Australia and in South Korea, right? And soon we're expecting this to reach 2030, the GDP to be close to $3 trillion, which would make it one of the largest countries, areas in the world. And it will definitely be the biggest Bay Area in the world. Currently, Tokyo, San Francisco, and New York Bay Area are the largest ones, but the Hong Kong, Guangdong, Macau, Greater Bay Area will overtake all of these. When we're looking at why the Greater Bay Area is of so much focus and why it's come into picture, we need to keep in context that in mainland China, there are 3 major zones of activity, especially around the eastern coastline, starting from Beijing all the way to Guangdong province. Right? So the Beijing cluster is quite a big economy on its own, roughly $2 trillion, more than that. You have the Shanghai cluster, which is led by Shanghai, Hangzhou, and a few other cities, again, close to $2 trillion. Then you come down to the Guangdong province, which is again about a $1.2 trillion GDP. Right? So you can see that there is focus for each of these areas on different themes. And the Guangdong province is the southernmost port of mainland China, and along with Hong Kong and Macau is in a way the access to mainland China from the rest of the world, where a lot of people tend to connect to mainland China. Right? Hong Kong has traditionally been the gateway to mainland China, as well as the launchpad for mainland Chinese companies going outward. And when it comes to innovation as well as trade, Guangzhou has been the major trade center as the head of the capital of Canton region for centuries, for millennia. And when it comes to innovation, Shenzhen is the Silicon Valley of the East. And so that's why you can see that the Greater Bay Area as a culmination is quite strong. And because of the proximity, and I mean, Hong Kong and Shenzhen share a border, which is basically as part of the Guangdong province, and Macau and Shenzhen share a border as well, right? And then the Zhuhai share a border, which is on the Guangdong province. So which because the geographical proximity, you're seeing that there is a lot more collaboration and focus on integrating the area together first, right? As I mentioned previously, with them being special administrative regions of China, they function in different international laws, but there's more focus on integrating and having more collaboration from a business perspective, and secondly, in terms of exchange of talent and people. So now, when you look at the three major centers or four major centers for the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau area, number one would be the Guangzhou city, which is the capital of the Guangdong province. Again, GDP of around $350 billion. Major focus area there will be for trade, import exchange trade, and manufacturing to a certain extent. Then comes Shenzhen. Shenzhen, both from a technology perspective, both from a hardware as well as a software side. Now, Shenzhen is the world's capital when it comes to drone manufacturing and a lot of IoT hardware manufacturing. There are a lot of other technology giants like Tencent who are headquartered in Shenzhen. So you see a lot of activities. So Shenzhen is more from an IT technology hub. Then comes Hong Kong as the financial center. There's also innovation focus on Hong Kong, but largely it's the financial center. And secondly, it complements very well with Guangzhou when it comes to trade. Hong Kong is the major hub between the East and the West, and a lot of trade between US and China is conducted through Hong Kong companies. Right. And number four is Macau. Macau, for the last few decades, has been more known as a place for gambling as well as gaming. Now you're seeing them transform into more of an entertainment hub, a bit like what Las Vegas has transformed over the last few years, where it's not just about gambling, it's about entertainment. So they're also trying to bring in more entertainment focus in Macau. Now, the other cities have other focuses, and not necessarily fintech being one, but they all have different focus areas, but not significantly large as compared to these four cities. All four cities have a GDP of $300 billion plus, right?
So locomotives of the area, right?
Yeah, so these are where the clusters are and major places are. So when you look at the policy, number one is looking at how businesses can do more from our, when we talk about businesses, we talk about how businesses can do more cross-border collaboration and be able to also offer products cross-border, right? So let's take, for example, currently Hong Kong has a connection as well as a policy which allows Hong Kong Stock Exchange to connect with the Shenzhen Stock Exchange and the Shanghai Stock Exchange, right? So where select number of Hong Kong exchange stocks can be traded via the Shanghai and the Shenzhen Stock Connect. And that's vice versa. That's called northbound. And then you have the southbound where you could again have mainland Chinese investors trading on Hong Kong exchange through their exchanges. So that provides a two-way access. So we are also looking at a possibility of mutual funds being recognized. And in going forward, we would expect and anticipate that insurance products and other wealth management products might also be recognized in a similar way, and access be granted for businesses and companies to offer it to the broader customer base. Now, Hong Kong alone is a population of about 7.2 million people, right? Whereas the Greater Bay Area in total is roughly 10 times that, 75 million people. So that provides, for both Hong Kong and Macau, it provides another big market from a retail perspective. Think about 70 million is larger than the UK and quite a few European countries in a sense. So that gives a huge market for companies based on these two cities. But secondly, it also provides a way for larger companies coming from overseas to connect into mainland China as first base, not just Hong Kong, but as the Guangdong province. On the reverse side, mainland Chinese companies aren't necessarily going to be looking at Guangdong as an opportunity. They already have that. The access is already there from a mainland Chinese companies. For them, it is more about access to Hong Kong and Macau, in particular Hong Kong, when they're going overseas and connecting to overseas markets. They already look at Hong Kong as a launch pad when they're going to places like Southeast Asia, Europe, or the West. Hong Kong is the largest IPO market in the world, predominantly led by Chinese companies doing their IPOs here. Once the GBA is formalized in terms of policies and regulations, it will then give them an access to providing the services to Hong Kong companies. I'll take an example. Alibaba and Tencent, right? So Tencent is a Hong Kong listed company, but WeChat Pay and Alipay were not offered to Hong Kong residents till about 2.5 years ago, when WeChat Pay and Alipay got the stored value facility license, which is the wallet. Prior to that, Alipay and WeChat Pay were only offered to mainland Chinese customers who were visiting Hong Kong, which is the case for most of Alipay and WeChat Pay globally. I think WeChat is only available in 7 markets for local markets. Otherwise, it's available in dozens of countries for Chinese markets, the Chinese travelers. So that's like a significant difference in the regulations. So we're hoping that there'll be more Chinese companies coming into Hong Kong to test out the product and then eventually launch internationally.
What about international companies in terms of, let's say, investment or technological and financial cooperation? Which benefits do they have to experience if they want to be involved with GBA?
So the GBA has a few special economic zones like the Shanghai Investment Authority and Investment Zone, which provides slightly better tax providence for international companies. So there's some relaxation in employee tax as well as company taxes for those who are set up in the special economic zone. But the key idea here is that earlier you were looking to access mainland China through Hong Kong, which had different jurisdiction, different rules and regulations. Potentially, if the GBA policies are executed and there's more cross-border collaboration, you could have, and that's one of our recommendations, is try to set up passporting of companies it's set up in Hong Kong and allow those companies to market their products or function or operate in the Greater Bay Area. Right? So there's a potential for that. It's not been formalized, but that's a potential that we hope that international firms can get, and that provides them as a good launchpad to go into the rest of mainland China. Right? So 70 million population is relatively small for, it's 1/20 of the population of mainland China. But still, you can see that the growth of the Guangdong province is quite strong, between 10 to 12% over the last 5 to 10 years. So Shenzhen is now over 10 million people. Guangzhou is a big city as well. So you're seeing still a large amount of growth in the area, and coupled with Hong Kong and Macau, it helps people come in and not just look at a small retail market.
Does that mean that most of the talents, most of the companies, most of the funds would be concentrated in just where cities out of the whole area?
Talent is going to be cross-border, but so one of the focus areas is to try to enable talent from Hong Kong to go and work, Hong Kong to work in the Guangdong province, and vice versa. So let's take 2 areas. Right? Since we're talking about fintech, so let's take fintech. There's a huge amount of experienced financial services talent in Hong Kong who understands both investment as well as corporate finance, as well as taxation, etc., which could be a big benefit to Chinese companies, mainland Chinese companies. And on the other hand, there's a lot of technology talent that's available in Shenzhen in particular, but across the Guangdong province, whom the Hong Kong companies could use. So that could be a big benefit for both. So this is an example of how the collaboration can take place from a talent perspective, right? When it comes to investment, there's a lot of VC investment that goes into mainland China from the US and other places. And startups also get a lot of investment. Shenzhen being such a big startup hub, a lot of investments go through there. But what we are potentially exploring and hoping to see is more clarity on how VCs can function from Hong Kong going into mainland China. And secondly is how mainland Chinese funds can invest into Hong Kong and other places. This capital outflow is restricted in mainland China, and the PBOC will have to come up with guidelines on allowing people to invest outside of mainland China for the amounts that general typical VCs need.
I also know that Shenzhen is adopting a very loyal policy for talents, and especially for those coming from outside of Shenzhen. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. I think in general, mainland China is adopting more open policies for international companies and talent. So, for example, earlier this year, late last year, the PBOC and the CSRC, the regulators in effect, eased the norms for foreign ownership of banks. So earlier, you could not have a majority ownership by a foreign bank. It would always be a local partner who had a majority ownership. Now they are allowing foreign institutions to have majority stake in the banks. So you can see a few of the banks are looking to take this up. It's not super prevalent. People are evaluating the options, but this also helps. The opening up will happen slowly. You can't expect a very rapid opening up, but we are seeing that happen slowly. So that will also help benefit companies who are looking to go full on to mainland China and launch their products there. So the GBA provides a good access. Secondly, when you're dealing with wealth management, there's a huge number of, so Hong Kong has a huge number of millionaires, right? But Guangzhou also has a huge number of traditional industry millionaires, and Shenzhen has a lot of the new millionaires. So Shenzhen as a city, in a sense, is only about 40 years old. It used to be a small fishing village, which has grown into what it is from 40 years old. So that's another place that can, that's another place that's beneficial for people looking to access mainland China's wealth owners.
So, in terms of development, what is your personal?
Yeah.
Is it too slow, or is it just fine for mainland China to be involved in terms of regulation, financial ties, for international companies to be involved, for cross-border relationships to be established? Is it just enough, or is it just too slow?
I don't think it's too slow. I would say it is conducted in a very careful manner, because when mainland China has allows international collaboration and international access for companies or capital outflows, they are maturing as an international destination and international regulations, right? So they don't want to set a precedence where they change too much and it doesn't work and backfire. So they're a bit more careful, more considerate and they take their time to do it. I won't say it's too slow. Once they decide to do it, then the pace can be very fast, like we're seeing with financial services and how their access is increasing. So it's just a matter of figuring out the best mechanisms. So Hong Kong is a well mature, well recognized top destination when it comes to international regulations, both for financial institutions and otherwise, right? It's a major legal arbitration hub as well. So whereas mainland China has been evolving their laws, and the economies are different. Right? Most developing economies are evolving, and they need to be a slightly different structure than to a developed economy, because their economies need certain allowances and different treatment than a developed economy where there's a lot of maturity among businesses and participants. Hong Kong is growing between 3 to 4% a year. Mainland China has been growing at 7-8% a year. So that's a big difference in how it's done. So when you look at regulations as well, say for example, crowdfunding is not allowed in Hong Kong. It's only allowed for professional investors, whereas in mainland China you've had peer-to-peer lending and crowdfunding for a long time. And the regulations came in a couple of years ago, but they typically allow innovation and business ideas to grow and reach a significant size before they come in with stronger regulations. Whereas in a place like Hong Kong, the regulations are fairly well set. So when you're looking for innovative solutions, you also have to wait to have the regulators allow that to take place. So Hong Kong regulators have also been trying to quicken the pace of their response to digital technologies like cryptocurrencies and blockchain and a few others. But it's a quid pro quo where both sides are dealing with different ways. And I expect in the next 3 to 5 years that the pace of change and allowing of regulatory frameworks and collaboration is going to quicken in mainland China and the rest of it. And that is why the GBA forms a very good place, because they are able to then interact with international companies through this mechanism, right? So both in Macau and Hong Kong, and then get and speeden up their process. So it's in a sense, you can think of it like a very large sandbox, which the government is also using for their updating the regulations and coming to terms and being in sync with international regulations.
Are you involved in this process as an association? Do you get to sit with government officials, government bodies to discuss, let's say, regulations?
We do. We actively work with the likes of the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, the Securities and Futures Commission, the Insurance Authority, and the MPFA on policy, which typically is about Hong Kong policy. But we also started our interaction with associations and government bodies in mainland China. So, for example, in 2 weeks' time, I'm having a delegation visiting from Beijing, which consists of some government officials as well as university and companies, right, to discuss about innovation in Hong Kong and what's been changed, what's been working well, and about how things are working in mainland China, right? So it's a lot of exchange of information. We're also invited from time to time by the regulators to take part in cross-border discussions about fintech in particular. So we're a very young organization. We're only 2 years old, but we have quite a bit of interaction as well as credibility in the market, and hence we're getting more engaged. And our focus with the GBA committee is to get more actively engaged in this process. So step one, yeah, it's just I think people have to be careful about expecting too much too soon. That's not going to happen because you're talking about structural changes that are unlocking both mainland China, but as well as the international market to mainland China. So the blueprint is just out in February. I think serious changes or structural changes will take at least 3 years to come into place. You will start seeing smaller things that will resolve. Maybe a movement of talent and people across border might be easier. There might be more mutual recognition of wealth products and investment products or insurance products in the first 3 years. But as a stronger, deeper connection will probably take a little longer because the blueprint does talk a lot about 2030 as one of the target zones for greater integration. And the governments are working on connecting infrastructure. So the Zhuhai Bridge, Hong Kong Macau Zhuhai Bridge is one of the world's largest, if not the world's largest, suspension bridge, and that's one way of connecting. But Hong Kong is working with the Shenzhen government on about spending $3 billion on an infrastructure product to connect infrastructure project to connect Hong Kong and Shenzhen for innovation zone. Right? They'll connect Hong Kong Science Park and a few other institutions along with the innovation hubs in Shenzhen. So there's a lot of investment happening irrespective, and it was launched before the blueprint for the GBA was launched, but we are seeing that the governments are keen to continue the collaboration irrespective of how the blueprint develops.
Great. Interesting. So thank you so much for the conversation. And
Happy to.
I hope to see you soon in Hong Kong. Thank you so much. And guys, do not forget to subscribe to our NexChange Interview Series channel. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot for having us. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.